Audio.
There are plenty of people who make it to quite literally legendary strength, never touching a hangboard, but if you look at the way they climb, they use a lot of bad holds, they're very intentional about it.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Struggle. It's me, Ryan. I'm happy you're here. I am coming at you live / recorded, I guess, from the podcast / utility closet here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I am, shocker, fighting a cold. I got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. I'm basically either fighting a cold or just waiting for my next cold. If you are a parent and you have young kids, then you know what I'm talking about. Solidarity. If you're not, do you even know how good you got it? You're so healthy. Enjoy this health. Go forth into this world and be healthy. Young, healthy, non-kid person. Anyway, it's a deload week. And here I am coming out with another Road to episode. I know I came out with one just recently with Coach Eric Hurst, and this is another one. And this one is with Coach Nate Drolet, because it's a two-hander this year. The goals are two-pronged. 1, Road to the Pyramid, and 2, Road to V8. And so Nate, as you might recall, coached me throughout a bit of last year, helped me level up my bouldering strength a bit as I wanted to stay strong and powerful while I was still building endurance for the project. And now with this new goal, I think I'll kind of be checking in with both Eric and Nate. And in this episode here, this conversation with Coach Nate Drolet, we mostly focus on the road to V8 and bouldering and training and kind of a winter training block for that. Like, what does the next kind of 4 weeks to 6 weeks look like? But we actually enter into this conversation talking about the pyramid. So the conversations are going to overlap. Nate is a Red River Gorge climber and also a boulderer. He's now in Salt Lake City, but he really knows his stuff. And a lot of the things that I'm working on, I think he is uniquely suited to be able to help me. So great conversation. We start off kind of recapping a little bit of my goals, and he talks about pyramid building and the importance of that. And I'm psyched. And then we pivot, and that's where the meat and potatoes of this conversation really come in, because we specifically talk about how I can be training over the next year, honestly, as I'm going for this V8 goal, but also just in the immediate term, how to structure out my bouldering training. And Nate is feeling pretty confident that I'm going to be able to click up through the grades without even having to get that much stronger. He feels like I just need to become a boulderer. And I'm psyched on that because I haven't really been much of a boulderer. And I'm pretty excited to just like dip into that, like try hard and refine my tactics and my technique to hopefully find some early gains, some kind of low-hanging fruit there. And then also, of course, build strength and power through the program that he lays out for me. So whatever grade you're going for, whether you're a route climber or a boulderer, what Nate shares in this first Road to V8 episode, I think is going to be very valuable and very applicable. Hope you get a lot out of it. And then if you want, you can work with Nate, and he'll tell you how you can do that a little bit later. He's a great coach, very thoughtful. He's been doing it for a long time with Power Company, as you probably know, and he's got fantastic stuff over on his YouTube channel. If you just want to dip into some like longer form videos where he talks about specific concepts, I encourage you to check that out. And I hope your winter training is going well. I hope you're trying hard out there. I'd love to hear from you. Whatever road you're on, please let me know. Misery loves company. Or struggle loves company, or breakthroughs love company. You know what? I just love company. So let me know what you're working on. And I hope you enjoy this conversation here on the Road to V8 with Nate Drolet. Do you just want to kind of treat this as like a 1-hour consultation, or are there other ways that you want to slice and dice this thing?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think that's what it'll be. It'll be maybe slightly more formal. I don't know. But yeah, regardless. Yes. Yeah. Do it as a consultation. I've got a bunch of notes. Also, I listened to the Eric Hurst one that just dropped.
Cool.
So I feel like I'm a little caught up with that.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. So that definitely will give you some context. Of course, for those who are listening or watching, what you're referring to there is the Road to What's Next episode. Eric and I have done these kind of semi-regular Road to episodes on my journey. Excuse me, my dog is choking on a bone at my feet right now. If you heard that. You never know what you're going to get in the podcast closet here. Right now, it's a dog choking on a bone. But anyway, yeah, the big mission, of course, was to send the Force 13A, and Eric kind of directed me through a lot of that process, but wasn't writing me training plans, wasn't working super closely with me between those bigger kind of guardrail episodes and conversations that we had. You were. And so not for the entire journey on the road to 13, I reached out to you. I think it was like early summer of 2024. And that's when you wrote me initially kind of like a hangboard plan, as I was feeling relatively weak in that area at the time. And I wanted to stay strong and build up some strength for the boulder problem on the force. And then as we got closer to the season, you were helping me to work in some other areas of training to prep me for that. And then of course we did some remote coaching, like over Google Meets as I was working on problems on the moonboard at my gym. And you were helping me with some technique and some mental game around working on a moonboard, which is quite challenging for me. Any sort of like limit climbing, whether they're set problems or board problems or the TB2 or whatever it is. So I found those sessions to be really fun. And so it was a little bit of like a potpourri of coaching that you gave me. We weren't on like a super structured thing, but it was kind of ad hoc at certain times where I felt like I needed like an extra little boost. And then in between, I was programming my own training. I don't want to sacrifice my Red River Gorge focus too much, on this kind of road to V8, if you will. But I do see the value in what getting stronger as a boulderer could do for me as I am trying to progress through harder and harder routes at the Red. So that brings us to this moment here, and I'll stop talking and hand it off to you, and we can dive into this consultation or conversation however you'd like.
Yeah, man, and I love that goal. I'll start by saying that I think that bouldering harder makes total sense. Having worked with you enough at this point and seen, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but when you're kind of looking at the force, I think I brought it up as like, it'd be nice if you could have some dedicated time to get stronger, more powerful, and maybe not even stronger. Like I don't think that's the best word for it, but mostly, can you increase your ability to climb harder boulder moves? Mm-hmm. Which for you might not actually have to be getting that much stronger, but there's a lot of experience that comes into it, just like anything. If you never really boulder other than just a little bit for training, it's hard to get much better at bouldering.
Right.
So yeah, I've thought this whole time, this would be a great way to go. And then also I think leaning towards a pyramid is a great idea. Like right now you're at 10-ish 512s.
Well, that probably would have been nice before we had this conversation that I go back and check. But I think in terms of like anything in the 512 range, like I've done a load of 12As, probably 15 or 20 12As. But then it like quickly goes off a cliff. Like I think I've done like 5 12Bs, 1 12C, 1 12D, 1 13A. So there's a fat bottomed pyramid there and then a tiny little tower. And I don't know what shape building that is, but it's not much of a pyramid, I guess. It's more of as Eric kind of playfully berated me, was, that I was building this skyscraper. And I'm okay with that. Not to get too defensive, but like, I think my pyramid, if you will, is built at the gym kind of, because I'm 2 hours from the Red. I'm a dad. I'm a weekend warrior. So I do a lot of non-project level climbing at the gym on routes in the cave or, on boulder problems. But I hear what he's saying. And I think it sounds like you agree, is there's just so much value to be had actually building that pyramid on actual rock. And fortunately at the Red, there's like a lot of really fun climbs in those grades that I haven't built out. So yeah, a lot of 12As. And I think we're getting into territory there where I should really be trying to flash a lot of those maybe. And then the Bs and the Cs and the Ds are not very well built out.
Yeah. The nice thing is I feel like these two goals complement each other really well. You can spend time focusing on leveling up your bouldering. And then I would say with your outdoor route time, and this is speaking as a coach, not as a person who has to do this. I would love it if you just spent the year building out your pyramid. Like, could you do 40 new 512s this year?
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
No is the answer, but
oh no, I disagree. I think you totally could. Yeah, there's, a story I really like. When Roger Bannister was in med school training to try and break the 4-minute mile, he had very little time to train. So he was training incredibly low volume, he kind of popularized intervals for training for distance. And he realized he couldn't race the mile during this time because it was so exhausting that it would mess up his training. He would race the mile on the weekend, and he felt like it wouldn't be till maybe Thursday that he could have a good training session again. So he was like, well, this isn't helpful. I am so limited on what I can do. So he decided to race the 800, which is a half mile. And he could do that. It didn't tank him for the rest of his training. It was great. The thing that was really cool about it, though, is the 800 is, it is a race from buzzer to buzzer. A mile, you get to kind of set a pace. You can take your time. You can sort of get a feel for how things are going to go. You make moves when you're a little more comfortable. With an 800, it's all tactics. You have to really be on top of your game. You have to be a racer to be good at the 800. And so when he ended up eventually going back to the mile, it made this massive difference. He realized, I now know how to see gaps. I know when to make passes. Famously, there was the Miracle Mile with him versus John Landy. It was the first time two sub 4 milers ever raced. Bannister ended up winning, which kind of solidified him as, the miler of the century, really. And he passed him on the outside in the final turn, which is like a weird place to pass. And he credited it to all this time racing the 800 and learning how to be really tactical and learn to see all the best spots. And that's really what let him win there. And cool. I like that story because this is a time when, he was super busy with med school, struggling to find enough time to train. And so he did this other thing and he managed to get so much out of it. I think in this same way, you can take your bouldering, you can really focus on bouldering. And with your outdoor climbing, can we level you up with basically your tactics, your approach, your mentality? Can you walk up to 12C and say, okay, this is something I can just do? And, you talked about how climbing with Eric, you were so impressed how he can bolt up something. And you're like, dude, this looks really hard, Eric. I don't know. And then he fires at second go.
For sure.
And that's experience. That's repetition. And this year, the cool thing is you can get that repetition this year. We don't have the force, kind of staring you down where you're like, I'd like to get repetition, but I got to get back to this thing. I need to be ready. You don't have to be ready for that thing right now. So you can take the time and really build this foundation.
I'm already feeling better about this, Nate. I was kind of honestly thinking about it today because I went and had like a hard bouldering session at the gym today on the set problems. And I just kept falling off of move 1 or 2, and I'm like, God, how do I get psyched for this? And now, we'll talk about that because that's a separate thing. There's a separate kind of, I think, mindset around trying to get psyched to dump the tank on single moves or, a few moves. So I'm curious to pick your brain on that. But I was just thinking oh my God, is this going to be my year? But now, no. You're reminding me, there's this equally important goal, which is the pyramid, but also that there's a lot of fun to be had in, quicker ascents, but also the tactics and the skills that one develops in doing that will then roll up into whatever the next kind of quote unquote force type, big project is. It's another 13A or a 13B or whatever. So yeah, that's cool. All right, thanks. Now I'm pumped up. You've lifted me up. Now what do we do? How do we get there?
Yeah, I think y'all were talking, when I say y'all, you and Eric, were talking about a schedule, and you were saying kind of 2 days bouldering, 2 days endurance work, which honestly I think is pretty good. Okay. The biggest mistake people make in the Red River Gorge, and you already said, the red is where your heart is. We want to keep that in sight, and I think that's super important. One of the big mistakes people have made for a long time is they will say, okay, I'm going to go to the red. Let me train all the endurance in the world, abandon anything related to strength and power. So they, lose all their power, lose all their strength, and maybe their performance goes up a little bit, but it's at the cost of all this strength and power. And then when they're going back to maybe bouldering or trying to train again, they're so detrained that they might have to spend a month and a half just to actually get to their prior levels. And then, we've spent 6 weeks of not improving essentially on our strength. So ideally, this is the whole idea around maintenance. I think maintenance is a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially in climbing. And we think, oh yeah, I would love to just maintain. Can I keep it at the tippy top level it's ever been at? I think that's an unrealistic expectation. Ideally, what we want though is, can we keep it within striking range? Can we end this year to where you're like, oh yeah, no, my endurance is like actually kind of good. And I bet if I like ramped up just for a month, I would be, not only would I have all that endurance back that I ever had, but also I've got all this power. And this is a completely new thing. The last thing we want to do is be making these big trades where you're just saying, okay, like all power or all endurance.
Right.
You can improve year after year doing that. And a lot of people do, but it's just a slow way to go about it.
If my goal, just for purposes of kind of teasing out this experiment, if my goal were solely the road to V8 and I'm like a V5, maybe 5/6 boulderer right now, depending on kind of what you would consider the boulder problem on the force and some moonboard problems I've done, but got quite a bit of ways to go. If it was like, hey, I'm living in Florida and I'm not going to go to the red or whatever, then would it be a full boulder focus, essentially, like a full kind of strength and power focus, or would we still even keep some endurance in there? Obviously, that's not the case because I have a two-pronged road here, and so I want to make sure. I'm just wondering, like, does my goal of continuing some Red River Gorge fitness and this goal of the pyramid, will it, by its very nature, kind of slow down, if you will, the progress that I could make if I solely had the goal of saying, I want to just focus on my bouldering grade?
Short-term, long-term thinking here. Short-term, maybe. If it was like, hey, I've got 6 months to do this, yeah, I would say let's ditch out the endurance. But especially for you, because I think a lot of bouldering improvements that you will get are from repetition. Just simply, I mean, how many times have you had routes where the crux was a hard heel hook on like a sloper that might slip off?
Yeah.
Not that often.
That's not much at the red.
No, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. When was the last time you used a bad foothold?
Exactly.
So much of bouldering is this very concentrated form of hard climbing. And there's a lot of things that you get so many repetitions in when you're bouldering that might only show up once a route on a 110-foot route in the red.
Right.
Which is why bouldering is such a good training tool. I mean, that's why forever, people are like, oh, bouldering's practice. Like, because it is this very like concentrated thing. And because for you, I think a lot of repetition, a lot of time on the wall is so important. I believe that having better endurance in the long run is much more important because that's going to improve your recovery between every attempt. A sport climber gets so many more high quality attempts per session than a normal boulderer. Like a regular boulderer, oh man, they're like having to rest so much all the time for everything. And maybe they can try really hard and that's cool. But if you don't have some sort of base endurance, and even with my boulderers, I like getting them a little bit of endurance, even if they kind of don't like it, just because it lets you get more reps in. That's more skill work. That's more for someone like you, especially. Let's say you take a trip down to Chattanooga. You're like, okay, yeah, this is kind of a haul. I'm down here. I've got 2 days to climb. Do you want to be able to have 10 good tries on your boulder or like 40?
Right. Yeah, no doubt. I for sure see the value of that. And just as a busy person, like if I can carve out a gym session and I'm able to do a 90-minute session instead of a 60-minute session in the course of a week, that's much better savings than if I have to do another gym session because I can only make it 60 minutes or whatever the kind of time would be. So yeah, having that fitness there, just even for trying to achieve the bouldering goals, makes a lot of sense to me. And so, Eric talked about this polarized training, as he called it, kind of two days of hard bouldering and maybe working some hangboarding or some work on the force board or something like that as part of the warm up or afterwards. So there's some kind of dedicated finger training in addition to maybe some hard bouldering and then a couple days of endurance. It seems like that could be quite a bit of load on this 45-year-old body, but I haven't really experimented with it that much yet. And so maybe that's just a matter of how long of sessions can I do or how short, or having some deload weeks in there. I'm not quite sure how I should think about that. And then also, before I hand it off to you to opine on that, is there a phase where it makes sense to do 3 days of bouldering work and 1 day of endurance, and then switch it to 2 and 2 as we're getting closer. Or, like if, let's say it's June and we know we've got June, July, August, September, we got 4 months before it gets good. Do we change that equation at all? Or do you kind of like that 2 and 2 for the type of climber that I am? Just want to take a quick second here to talk about how I'm keeping track of all my training and climbing over the course of days, weeks, months, and years. And I'm using an actual physical analog journal, a paper journal that I'm holding in my hands right now called the 5-Year Training and Performance Journal. I created this. I've been using something like this for the last 9 years, and it's a reflective journal, meaning I put something in for every single day. And at the end of the year, the next year starts back underneath that first one. So that as you go, you are able to see where you were at 1 year prior, 2 years prior, 3 years prior. You can log your goals at the beginning of every month and see what you checked off. And then the big breakthrough for me is that I'm able to reflect back and see what training interventions are actually working, what are worthwhile, and maybe which ones aren't. And I'm also able to see with a ton of gratitude and joy how much progress I've made. And I've never been able to get that from training apps. I like training apps. They help me to do my training, but this reflective journal has totally changed how I'm able to understand my personal training, my performance, and then everything that I do as a climber, like all my notable routes that I've sent, all my thoughts and dreams, they're all in here. And I get to look back and enjoy that day after day and year after year. And now you can too, because I made it and I'm selling it. And for $40, I think that's probably the cheapest thing you could buy that will last you 5 years as a climber. You can learn more over at thestruggleclimbingshow.com/journal. This episode's brought to you by the Force Board. Are you into training your fingers? Dumb question. You're a climber. You're obviously obsessed with your finger strength. You're probably looking at your fingers right now as I'm saying this. And let me tell you, the Force Board is a huge step up from hangboarding. If you're not familiar with what a force gauge is, it's this little digital device that connects to your phone, and as you pull on a block or a portable hangboard, it tells you exactly the force that you are using so that you don't need to mount a hangboard, you don't need weights or pulleys to get the desired training stimulus, and you can track all of your data seamlessly and program your workouts right there in the app. And training your fingers this way, let me tell you, instead of doing weighted hangs, reduces injury risk and is just a heck of a lot faster, easier, and more consistent. I've been using one for months now. It is super portable, so I can easily bring it with me to the crag or to the gym for warm-ups. And then I'm also using it to train up my endurance right now, doing some 7-3 repeaters at 60% of my max, which is super easy to program because the app gives me that target line to hit on each and every pull. And as soon as I can't hit that target, I know my session's done. Boom. That's it. I don't get injured. I don't get overly fatigued. Hit that link in your show notes or swing on over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/forceboard to learn more about it and score yourself 10% off your purchase by using code STRUGGLE at checkout.
Let's take a few steps back first. So I don't know a ton about your longer term training history. So you had climbed like 5'11" for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How many years had you been climbing when you had like realized at 5'11", you're like, I want to level up?
For about 10 years. A lot of that was out west, and I was doing a lot of like multi-pitch, submaximal hand jamming type stuff. So in terms of the red, it was a couple years at the red, climbing in like the 5'10", broke into 5'11" while I was at the red. A couple of years of kind of climbing in that 5'11" territory. Maybe not even a couple. Actually, I think I broke into 5'11" and like it was about a year later or a year and a half later, I broke into 5'12". And then from my first 12A to my first 13A was 5 years. In that time, that's when I really started focusing on training and that kind of thing. So essentially it was like I was just climbing and going to the gym sometimes, mostly just kind of climbing and having fun. And then I was like, oh no, I really love this. I want to work to get better. And so I started training, like really training when I was like 40 or 39 and then, up until today.
Okay, cool. Do you feel like your bouldering strength has been improving over the last few years?
Yeah, it's interesting on the metrics. So I sent you some of my metrics, and then I didn't send this in the email that I sent you, but I looked up some historicals, and I can rattle through them real quick here. Like in terms of, so this is not answering your question directly because you're asking about my bouldering like ability and grade, and that's obviously applying it to the wall and movement are different things than just like how much can I hang from my fingertips. But if we look at like the metrics real quick, like my max hang And my body weight's pretty much stayed the same every year for the last 5 years. So I'm just going to talk about weight that I'm adding rather than that I am plus my body or whatever, just for ease of conversation. But I do keep track of my body weight. It's just like very consistent. But anyway, like on the 7-second hang on a 20 millimeter half crimp with 2 hands, last year I added 65 pounds. And just a few days ago when I retested, I was able to do 67.5 pounds. So not a huge gain in terms of like numeric value from last year to this year. Kind of happy I didn't lose because again, the focus was very much on like sport climbing and like wasn't doing a lot of bouldering. And then if we look back further, because I've got these tests going back years, it was 10 pounds lower in 2023 and 20 pounds lower in 2022. So I added 10 pounds from 2022 to 2023. I added 10 pounds from 2023 to 2024. And then I only added 2.5 pounds in the past year. Very similar on like my 2-rep max weighted pull-up. Actually, I was down a little bit. I was down 5 pounds. I did 80 pounds, added 80 pounds to those 2 pull-ups just recently. And it was 85 pounds on the same date last year. But then it was 70 and then 65. And so like I've kind of like slowly ticked up, and that's pretty good. I mean, it's more than 150%, I think, of body weight. So like, I don't feel like that's not like an area I've been like training because it's seemed pretty sufficient. Yeah. And then endurance was exactly the same as last year, the test that I did, like where it was like 60% of max and doing like 7-3 repeaters. The time that I was able to have under tension was exactly the same. So I don't know. I guess the upshot here is like not a whole lot of change in the past year. Slowly trending up kind of across everything, which is nice, or like kind of slightly up and down or flat. But training specifically for the force, it did have that boulder problem in the middle. And so maybe that was enough to kind of keep my strength and power where I needed to be. And I was working in some, kind of maintenance sessions, if you will, like at home or on a spray wall or whatever. And then obviously the endurance was kind of a byproduct of doing that route a lot of times and doing other routes too. I wasn't exclusively on the force. Okay. So that was like, maybe I could pause there and you could, if you have any thoughts or questions on that, we could talk it through. That didn't answer your question. You're like, is your boulder grade improved all that much? And so I can talk about that if you'd like as well.
I mean, we can start there. How much work were you doing per week for bouldering, strength, power during the last, 2 years? Let's say.
I mean, over like you kind of wrote me that plan over the summer. If like I'm just kind of looking at like the last year because it's more fresh in my mind. You had me do like a very dedicated like hangboard repeater routine that I think you maybe pulled from like Will Anglin or
from modified. He wrote an article called "Hangboarding a Way." It's the 6 and 10 repeaters,
right? And it was like much more volume than I was. I was like 6 and 10, and like it was, if you recall, like you're like, let's do them, let's add 10 pounds or whatever. And like quickly I was like, I need to take off weight. They were very hard for me. But over the course of, I think it was like a 6-week thing that you wrote for me. Over the course of that, I actually saw like marked improvement, and that was cool. And that was in the summertime. And then I did a pretty good, I would do like all the way through the entire season of the force. I was keeping 1 day in of hard bouldering at the gym. And it was usually a short session, maybe like 45 minutes or something like that. Maybe I would do like 10 attempts. Leading up to it, you had me do some higher volume. I think it was like 6 problems, 3 attempts. So I was doing like 18 goes, if you will. And they were sub-maximal. So I was sending most of them. And that was kind of leading up. But then when I got in season, I was doing maybe like anywhere between like 6 and 10 kind of hard like moonboard or set problems at the gym once a week. But most of the focus was on like at that point I was building capacity. And so I was doing a lot of time on the tread wall at my gym Rock Sport here, or in the cave on ropes. I had a little force like replica that I set on a spray wall at that gym. So I would climb on the tread wall and then run over and try and do the crux problems. And so it was a lot of capacity stuff for sure, like as we got closer to the fall. But I did try to keep in like that one hard bouldering session pretty consistently. And I think maybe I only pulled it out like for the 2 or 3 weeks right before I sent.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing I'm hearing there is that in the past, you haven't done a ton of bouldering. And, I know you've done some hangboarding and some lifting, but for the most part, you've been able to keep improving year after year to some degree. Maybe this last year was a little bit more sustained.
If I'm trying to self-diagnose, I haven't up to this point really put in the effort on boulders like I'm willing to do on sport routes. So like I don't project, for example, like if it's a set problem or even if it's like a moonboard problem, if I try it a couple times and it's not feeling like doable, I'll just kind of be like, nah, it's not for me. Let me just go find this other thing. So I've just essentially just been climbing kind of around my flash grade or like single session send grade for probably the last 5 years. And there's a couple little projects on the moonboard, like when I was working with you over the summer, where we identified like a V5, a couple of V5s and a V6, where it's like on my list and I'll come back to it. But it's not like I've got friends there power spotting me into positions, or I'm trying to sort out the right, like, where should my hips be on this? Like, I'll just kind of hope that I've got a low gravity day and the caffeine's dialed in right. And, I'll just throw myself at it and, oh, it almost went, or it didn't go, or whatever. And then, I'll just save it for the next session. So I just haven't put myself into bouldering like I do in sport climbing. And I think there's like a mental disconnect there right now for me on that I'm hoping to fix as we make this one of my main goals for the year.
Yeah. There are a few things there. One, that's actually great to hear. I mean, if that's how you've been approaching bouldering and essentially only doing it like once a week, I mean, there's a lot of room to improve upon that without being like, hey, we need you in the gym bouldering 3 days a week. Like, right. Truthfully, I could see 2 hard days. And if you ended up doing a third, maybe it's just a skill session. But if you've managed to improve year after year in climbing, maybe less so in bouldering, but like even then your strength numbers have gone up. If you've been doing that with one session a week, and especially without like really going back to super hard things, amazing. There's so much room to improve without adding a ton. And if anything, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, and this is, for a lot of people, this feels very counterintuitive, but for people who are a little more time poor or just life rich, however you want to think about that.
I like that.
If you want to have more climbing in your week, sometimes it can be useful to say, okay, instead of trying to do 3 1-hour sessions, can you do 2 1.5-hour sessions? And yes, it might be harder to carve out a longer period at one time, but less of your session is going to be dedicated to warming up. Like, once you're there and warm, awesome, we can really get some work done. But if you're doing 3 60-minute sessions, how much time are you spending in the car going to the gym and back? How much are you getting stopped at, like when you run into someone and you're like going to chat, and then there's all this time warming up and doing all of that eats so much of your day without you even realizing it, that for a lot of people, especially people who time is so important, it sounds silly, but having a few much longer sessions, or even like moderately longer sessions, they're going to get so much more climbing in the week for the amount of time that it's going to cost.
I do like that. Just in terms of like, oh, okay, I can block out a couple hours here because I dropped my daughter off at school and the gym's right across the street. Whereas, yeah, the multiple trips can quickly add into like a lot of just leakage, like time/efficiency leakage. Now that also though is reliant on my body's ability to actually have a quality 90-minute session, as opposed to, maybe 60 minutes are quality and then I'm just like losing skill because I'm losing tension and my core is shot or whatever. So there's, there may be a fine line there just in terms of like how hard you would want me going in any given session. And, is it a volume session and submaximal, or is it like limit bouldering? But in theory, I definitely would do better with that, just with my schedule, to have like a slightly longer couple sessions than 3 shorter sessions. But I'm not saying I can't do it. Like, I would love to explore what we think is the best way for me to, like, the best model for me to progress as a climber. And then if I have to make some sacrifices, which inevitably will happen with kids and older parents and all the things that happen with having a couple jobs and all of that, then, I'll figure out where to make those sacrifices. But I am curious at like, okay, well, what's the, what do we think would be the optimal way to make this happen?
Honestly, I think twice a week is where I would start. Cause also I just want to see where that gets you. Like, there's a lot of people who only train hard twice a week who climb. I mean, I know people who've gotten up to the V15 level climbing hard twice a week. Like, you don't have to do a ton. And then there's a few things to watch out for as a sport climber. One is, because you were saying you don't know if you can climb for 90 minutes. One thing sport climbers are so guilty of, and it's funny, I remember the first time I bouldered with Carrie Scott. She was terrible about this. She's someone who, actually, she would be a great person for you to talk with about this, because she was someone who climbed 514 before climbing V10, which is not a super common thing. And she felt, I remember when she did Coltrane, she had said the boulder on Coltrane felt like the hardest boulder she'd ever done in her life, which is crazy. Like, that is so wild to think that the hardest boulder you would do is on a route.
Right.
Because bouldering on a rope is so inefficient. It's so hard to work.
Yeah.
But she just didn't have as much of the experience, where now she's a tremendous boulderer.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, because with a high level of certainty, I think the hardest boulder I've ever done is on the Force. And, it's that kind of V5-ish, however you would maybe describe that kind of low crux, like at the fourth bolt.
Yeah.
And I've never done anything outside that's that hard. Maybe I've done something on a moon board or something like that that's been at that level or a little harder. It's hard to know. I haven't done a lot of outdoor bouldering, so, that's a factor as well. But yeah, I think I'm kind of in that similar boat where I'm, quote unquote, kind of climbing above my grade, if you will, for like what my strength is as a climber. It's not possible to climb above your grade. You climb at the grade that you climb at. I figured out a way to send the Force, but it's, I had to really dial in every efficiency in order to make that boulder happen, and then have enough to get through the rest of the climb. So yeah, I'm really excited about like putting me in a time warp and, go forward a year. And I've built up a lot of this strength and power. And I think that's going to happen no matter what. Like, I think I'm going to get stronger and more powerful by just kind of doing a couple days of hard bouldering a week. But that doesn't help to achieve the goal in and of itself, because the goal is to move my bouldering grade up significantly. And I think a lot of that will have to do with, as you've already noted, maybe I don't even have to get all that much stronger. I just have to become a better boulderer. And I don't really know how to do that. There's tactics and there's technique and there's that mindset and that grr. And, there's a lot that goes into being a better boulderer that is different than just like ticking up my 20 millimeter hang number by 10 more pounds,
Totally. Yeah. And I think especially if you're approaching this as a sport climber, I was saying the thing Carrie was so guilty of is always wanting to rapid fire boulders. Because as a sport climber, and I mean, I sport climbed for the first decade of my climbing career, we associate fatigue as pump. So it's like you try a boulder and it's like, okay, well, I'm not pumped. I'll just pull right back on. Well, I'm still not pumped. Of course you're not. You climb 120-foot routes. This one move on this moon board will never get you pumped. You will just stop being able to pull on at some point. And the thing is, it's really hard to perceive being powered down. So you pull on, you try 2 hard moves. I don't feel any different when I'm on the ground. Like, pump you feel, it's a very obvious thing. But being powered down, it's just this invisible meter that's going on inside your body. So you need to stop, actually rest long enough. And this is why a lot of sport climbers struggle to get more powerful from bouldering, is they don't rest long enough. They'll just rapid fire. And so, they're getting 1,000 moves in their bouldering session, where the boulderer who's out climbing them by 4 grades may only be getting 300, but they're much higher quality goes. Right. So that's one thing. Another thing that's big is mentality. And there are these mindsets that I believe are very important for sport climbing. One, for instance, and you kind of talked about this, is, you walk up to a hard boulder, try it a few times, you're like, oh, yikes, this is really hard. I'm going to move on. If you're sport climbing, if you try a sequence and you're like, dude, this feels like it would take me 2 weeks to figure out, on most climbs, that's too hard. In the red, that's way too hard. You're doing something wrong, most likely. And it's the same thing. There's this piece of advice that gets floated around every now and then around saying, don't try as hard as you can on a move until you know exactly how to do it. Let's find all the details and the minutia first. Once you're doing it perfectly, okay, now you try hard. That's lovely for sport climbing. It's great. If I have to do a move 90 feet off the ground, yeah, If I'm trying 100% fresh after sitting on the bolt for 3 minutes and I'm like barely sticking it, yikes, I'm in
Yeah.
trouble. Like that sport climb's not happening right now.
Right.
But with bouldering, we have to throw that advice out the window. We have to figure out how to balance. Yes, I need to move better. I need to find the right positions and how to apply myself and apply force to all these holds correctly. But also, you just have to try really hard almost every go. Like, there are a lot of moves that simply will not happen if you are not trying hard.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to mentally shift into that. And I think this is going to be an important breakthrough for me as a climber if I can start to access that more consistently. I think because I'm having started as a trad climber and then moving into Red River Gorge climber, there's just you're rewarded so much for finding efficiencies and for relaxing and for resting.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so like I'm kind of fighting against my entire, upbringing as a climber to say, no, like dump the tank, every move, which is also like fighting against evolutionary psychology because our bodies, have been through the process of evolution, like programmed not to do that. It's always like keep some in reserve because another lion might come around the corner. So that is really hard. But I will tell you, like, it's like for people who play golf, I don't play golf anymore, but like I had like a regrettable phase where I was into it. When like before I discovered rock climbing, how wonderful it had been if I had just gone to a climbing gym instead of a driving range. But something with golf where it's like you're out, like you could have like the worst day ever on the golf, like just fucking everything is shanking. It's terrible. And then you hit like one super plumb beautiful shot and you're like, I know what it feels like. I'm going to come back golfing again. And today I was having like just the worst day at the gym. I decided to only go out and try V6 set problems at the gym, which I've never done a V6. And it's like pretty hard set problems at this gym that I was at. And like I tried out 3 and I just like couldn't get one move, just like one, maybe I'd get one move, but I couldn't get to the second move. And I was just feeling like really demoralized. And then kind of took a break and I was like, you know what? Forget that it's 9 moves to the top. Like I'm just going to look at that third hold and be like, that's the top. And I just reframed my thing and I like pulled on and I gave it 100 fucking percent to try to get to the third hold. And I got to the third hold and then like had nothing or whatever, but I was like legitimately psyched. Like I had like, you would have thought that I sent the thing because I did 2 moves that I wasn't able to do, in my other prior attempts. So yeah, I don't know if that's like the mindset. Like, I don't know how I go from that to then adding in like 7 more moves, but just like essentially throwing everything at singular moves is a really foreign feeling to me.
Yeah, that's understandable. As far as linking more, it's very similar to sport climbing. You do one bolt length. Awesome. Let's do the next. Also, like you haven't clipped all the bolts yet. Well, let's start there. Same thing with bouldering. We just break it down, but on a much smaller level. And I will say too, and I was going to get to this at some point, as far as bouldering V8 goes, the nice thing about bouldering grades is you can really find things that tailor to your strengths so well. Even just being like, if you're slightly taller than average and you're good at heel hooks, you can find things that might feel 2 V grades easier. So that is really nice. Where in sport climbing, it's a lot harder to find things that just completely suit you. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say I do think learning how to try harder is better for just a handful of moves at a time, but then also getting used to pulling on and trying to send full boulders. Like for you, I mean, I would say, because we have enough time, even starting with a little more of a pyramid mindset of just saying, can you climb every V4 in every style in your gym? I mean, that's a good place to start. Even the ones that you look at, you're like, that looks terrible. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty confident the answer is no, because V4 is still like, I can flash like half of them, I feel like, if they're in my style. And if they're not, I think there's probably some that are like either slopers or pinches or kind of more on the slab that require some real technical positioning and stuff like that might feel like limit. Yeah, it is interesting. I'd love to talk about that. we've talked a little bit about kind of the outdoor pyramid. If I'm a V5 boulderer right now, and that's not outdoors, that's indoors. I don't spend much time bouldering outdoors, but I'd like to do more. But in any case, like V5 indoors at this one gym, and I want to try to get to V8. It's a big jump. First of all, the goal was originally V7, and then I let Anna Hazelnut talk me into V8. But whatever. I mean, regardless of the goal, it's like, it's going to be hard for me because I haven't pushed that upwards at all over the last few years. Now with a dedicated focus and talking with you, and, you know, I'm hopeful that I can unlock maybe some early gains. I don't know if that means just kind of breaking into V6 or beyond, but I don't just like, I'm not going to go like identify a V8, the TB2 or the moonboard or whatever, and just like start going for it, I'm assuming. So building the pyramid is kind of a part of that. And yeah, it'd be nice to have a sense for how you feel, how I should take a look at these 2 sessions a week. You know, is one a system board session and one a set board session? Is one a pyramid building or a on-siting or whatever? You know, are there some general ideas around how I should program this? Or maybe I'll have you just program it for me. But, you know, how should I look at these 2 days?
Yeah. Well, first off, you're a boulderer now, and we don't on-site in bouldering. It's only flashing. So
there's no on-site. That's it.
No. You don't on-site boulders.
Okay.
If someone says they
so
on-sited
much
it
already.
Yeah. On-siting boulders is like day flashing. These are mythical terms.
Okay. The normal.
As far as session layout goes, first off, I think getting some benchmarking of your bouldering skills would be super useful. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but actually picking out, it's weird because the moonboard has literal benchmarks, but picking out boulders that are your benchmarks, and they can be on the moonboard if you want, they can be tension board, whatever you want. But for you, I would say let's find, maybe 6 boulders. Pick 2 V5s, 2 V5s, 2 V6s, 2 V7s. And these are climbs that ideally you haven't tried before, and also maybe that you don't want to try again anytime soon, because we're not going to try them again for a while. But you go in, you can split this up over 2 sessions, spend like 15 to 20 minutes on each boulder, try all of the moves, and you're going to record this, shoot a video. So you're going to try all the moves, maybe try some links, see how it goes, rest as much as you need in between boulders. And now this is your new metric of, okay, how did these 2 V5s feel? How did these V6s feel? How did these V7s feel? January 25th, 2025. And now you can come back 6 months from now, 8 months from now, a year from now, and you can try those same boulders. And I really like recording on this because with bouldering, learning how to identify minutia, even the difference between like, oh, I almost stuck to this hold to like, oh, I almost stuck to this hold even slightly more. I mean, that can be a whole day win right there. That's like your perfect drive.
Right.
Is just, okay, I didn't actually stick this hold any better, but I felt more confident like I was going to. Like you just have to gaslight yourself into bouldering harder. I think this is how this works. That's huge. But if you give yourself, 6, 8, 12 months in between, you might forget how it went. So I like video a lot because those V7s, especially, if it's on like tension board or moonboard, whatever it is, yeah, they're still going to feel hard in 6 months or 8 months. Even when you climb V7, they're probably still going to feel very hard.
Sure.
Because that is the upsetting thing about bouldering. It doesn't matter how strong you get. Bouldering's always still hard.
Well, I think this is a super fun concept for me because it's, like how often do you check in on those? Like I'm not creating, this isn't a project list I'm creating. These are, as you noted, like they're climbs that maybe I don't want to revisit. I guess you're saying intentionally because we're not trying to project these. We're trying to use them as a more neutral assessment of my strength and skills that I'm developing on other problems that may be similar but aren't the same.
Totally. You can check in every now and then. Like the main reason for not wanting to immediately go and project these is they become useless as a metric.
Right.
It's like if you said, oh, I want to see how my front lever is, if you test it, you're like, oh, that's good. It'd be cool if it was better. And then you go on a front lever training program. Okay, well, front lever's not a good metric for us anymore. We kind of broke that. So we want to avoid that. Yeah. That said, there are things, let's say if there's a big heel hook move on the V6, so there's a big dead point to a crimp on the V7. Sure, if every like if every 3-4 weeks, when you're feeling really good, let's say you come off a deload every 5th week or whatever, you're like, oh, I feel really good. I'm going to go check out that dead point. Just give it like 2-3 goes, see how it feels. I think that's totally fine. Does that diminish the quality a little bit? Sure. But if it makes you psyched, who cares? Because if suddenly you're like, oh man, I couldn't even generate upward momentum for this crux move, and now I'm like touching usable surface on this hold. Okay, cool. Plan's working. Let's go back to it.
Yeah. All right. That's a fun homework assignment for me to do. You know, I guess out of kind of the reality of how gym sets work, it can't be on a gym set because they're going to reset it, you know, in a few months. So I should choose these on system boards that are available to me in my area, which right now there's a moon board at 40 degrees, 2019. There's a 2019 moon board at 25 degrees at another gym. And then I can travel a little ways to get to a kilter board. I'm working on trying to get a TB2 into the local gym here. But essentially,
nice.
I'll want to identify climbs that are on those so I know that in 6 months they'll still be around for me to work on. And you mentioned like 2v5s, 2v6s, 2v7s. I've only done a couple v5s on the moon board.
Perfect.
Ever. And so like I'm assuming the v6s and the v7s are going to be like embarrassing, dude. Like I don't know how I'll do any moves on those, but is that what you want? You want them to be like really hard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because let's say if you just went through a bunch of V4s and 5s, you come back and you're like, okay, yeah, they felt okay back then and they feel okay now.
Right.
But if you take something that feels improbable, and even just thinking about that, about how does this V7 feel when you light it up? You're just like, oh, dude, what is Nate making me do? Perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
That's what I try and inspire in all my clients. But if you can go from that to even you light it up and you're like, okay, I think I could do like maybe 2 moves now. Incredible. Even if it's not even true. But yes, having them be harder, I think is great up to a certain degree. Yeah, we could light up a V10 for you, but I mean, at that point, it'd be very challenging to tell, are you making progress? Because it might be, well, I couldn't pull onto the holds, but now I can like also still not pull onto the holds, but maybe better.
Right.
That's not that motivating. We'd like to at least still see some progress.
Dig that. Oh man, I'm excited to do this. Okay, so my homework is to get out, get a good warm up in, and video me trying a couple of those grades. Do you recommend, as I'm searching for these, or maybe if you have some in mind, if you're familiar with the 2019, I think you are because we've spent some time on that in our remote sessions, but should I pick, if I'm picking 2v6s, try to make them quite different in style or layout, just so I'm covering some bases?
I think that's nice. There's a few things you can think about. You can think about stylistically. I like something that at least one of them should be more sustained. So if you look at it and you say, okay, these are 5 moves that look consistent, versus you don't want like a 1-move wonder.
Right.
Because once again, like a 1-move V6, that might be the crux of a V8 or 9 that also has fluff around it.
Sure.
So we don't want that. Ideally, you want something that's a few more moves, like rather than just a big 2-3 move pull. And then you can also look at if you have anything specific you're trying to improve at. So if you're really bad at heel hooks, moonboard maybe not the best, but they exist. Maybe you pick something that has hard heel hooks or whatever it is, underclings, side pulls, cast-ons, big deep lock-offs, dynos, anything that might seem important. But if you don't have one, which right now I feel like for you, it's more important just to keep leveling up. I would say pick 2 things where you're just like, okay, there's a lot of moves. Nothing looks infinitely harder than any of the other moves. And I can also I can send you some after this. I'm thinking of some right now. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be anything wild, but typically not 1-move wonders. If there's a style you want, lean towards that.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love your thoughts on it. And just if we're speaking about the moonboard for a second, do you recommend that they be moonboard benchmarks or highly rated or highly repeated? Does it not matter?
Doesn't matter. I would say right now, if you were trying to burn through all the benchmarks, if you were like, I'm in my ravioli era and trying to, tick all of them,
right?
Maybe benchmarks wouldn't be great because you'd be sad you couldn't do them. But honestly, there are so many V5 benchmarks on the 2019. I would say, yeah, pick benchmarks because also it's fun to be able to talk with someone else about a benchmark. If you're like, oh, I'm trying DOS Moon hard, and it is aptly named, like, and someone else who tries is like, oh my gosh, I know, jumping to that little yellow mini pinch. That's fun versus if you're trying some random boulder that's like 2 stars that only has 1 ascent.
Right. Well, I think I've finally found the place where I can put pixel bricks. Maybe that will be one of the V5s that I choose. That I tried once and I was like, oh no, that's a V10. So maybe Ravioli will make it onto my list. Not anything that I've ever sent, but on my see how I'm progressing benchmark list. Okay, cool. I really love that, dude. And so I'm going to do that. So that'll set that benchmark kind of baseline, if you will, that we'll check in on every handful of months over the course of this year. What a fun way for us to gauge my skill and my fitness, my progress along the way, like a visual way to do that. Really love that. And then in terms of sessions, do you want to talk about programming for a second and like sessions and kind of how try to fit all this into a week? And, are they all limit sessions on the boulders and all just kind of medium endurance sessions for my, fitness days? I'd love your thoughts on all that.
As far as, we'll start with fitness days. I'm going through my list right now of all the notes I took. And I just got to for fitness days. I would say for outdoor fitness days, I would lean away from super bouldery routes. Because if we're going to get bouldering is so efficient, it's a great way to train and practice. You get so many repetitions in. So I would say if you're going to do hard bouldery routes outside, throttle the difficulty back. Let's look at, is roadside still open?
Yeah, you can get there. Wild Gift was one that I kind of had in the back of my mind, had on the list. Is that what you were thinking?
Wild Gift's great. Like Strevel's Gets in Shape is one there.
Oh, I don't know that.
It's like V4 or V4. It's 12B, but it's V4 to, 510.
Okay.
Something like that, where this is a low enough grade that, yes, it's going to feel hard, but man, I don't think there's any reason for you to try a route more than 10 times, before the fall. There's so much good climbing, especially at what you're at, that you can do so much. I mean, yeah, go to Bronau Wall, go climb Little Teapot. It's a 12A that is short and stout.
Yeah, and then in those, because I have been thinking about what are like shorter, more bouldery or punchier routes, and a handful come to mind. You and I can kind of ping pong a list on email because it's a little inside baseball for those who are listening if they're not Red River Gorge climbers, but they exist at every grade. And so as I'm building out that pyramid, do I want some of that pyramid to be more bouldery routes because it kind of falls in line with some of these more bouldery goals that I'm having? So that could be like a Stunning the Hog, or it could be Maisie May. Of course, Maisie May is 13A, and I don't want to tuck into another big project, but it's essentially like a V6 from what I understand for 2 bolts, and then the route's over. It's a highball essentially. But then would I take out a hard bouldering day like that? Like if I'm going to go out and work on kind of a bouldery route, am I not then achieving kind of the fitness goal? You know what I'm saying?
No, exactly. And that's my thought. You're kind of muddying the waters there, which is why I think you're better off, if you're going to do something bouldery, make it easier so that you can get more pitches in the day. And because I think the tactics for learning how to do a hard boulder on a rope are important, but it doesn't need to be Maisie May difficulty for that. It can be, literally just find something that has a V3, V4, but then some fluff around it. Cool. You still have to figure that out. V4 on a rope's still very challenging. It's so funny. I alternate between sport and boulder every few years. Every time I go back to sport climbing, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just work this the way I get to work a normal boulder because it's so much easier. And then every time I go back to bouldering, I'm like, oh, I miss these things about sport climbing with working a boulder. But there are a lot of disadvantages to working a boulder on a rope. It takes time. You have to have a belayer, all these things. I think it's not the most efficient use of your time. And we really want to try and maintain as much of your endurance as possible. So routes that I think could be really useful are things that are maybe more powerful in the bottom and enduro afterwards. 2 good examples that come to mind. One is American Dream and one is Resurrection.
Yeah, cool. I've been on American Dream once and I was like, oh my God, that's so hard. And that's one of the things that precipitated me going over to the force, because Kyle was like, yeah, just the force isn't that much harder. So, but I would like to get back to dark side. And I also haven't done Mama Benson, or Shanghai looks really cool. So there's some good stuff over there. But yeah, American Dream definitely has like a tough, like kind of powerful crux, just maybe like a bolt in or something like that, if I recall, as you kind of come off that ramp. Mm-hmm. And then Resurrection I've never been on, but that was one that you were encouraging me to get on this past season. And it never lined up for me to put some sessions in over at the Load. But okay, I'll add those to the list. And then also just continue to try to build out just the general pyramid. And did you I mean, you pulled a number of 40 512s, kind of out of thin air there. I'd have to like back into the math to see how many days I can get out to the red and like how reasonable that is. Because if I'm trying to do some pyramid building, then that would include some 12Cs and maybe a 12D or 2 or whatever, however we would want to kind of tackle that, which would require, multiple sessions, no doubt, because that's very hard for me. I've put in 3 sessions on stain. I thought it was going to go in 1 session, and it just does not want to go. In any case, do you like picking, rather than picking like, oh, let's do 10 12As, 5 12Vs, 3 12Cs, and 1 12D, do you like saying, oh, let's do 40 12s, and maybe there's a couple on the top end, but we're building out a ton at the bottom end? How do you like to build the pyramid? Short and stout, or tall and thin?
Everyone's different. I like total numbers. And for a lot of people, you just want to climb harder anyways. Because I could say, hey, Ryan, I want you to do 45 12s. And yes, you could gamify this and be like, okay, 40 12As it is, Nate. Like, right. I'm going to win this game. But you would get like 20 in and you're going to be like, man, I want to try something harder. Because if you did 20 12As, you're going to start doing those like in 1 and 2 goes. You might get to the point where you're like, I'm consistently doing 2 12As a day. That's cool. Maybe 3. Okay, this is getting boring. Like, I don't care about this 40 goal anymore. I want something that entertains me more. I want to go try and do some 12Bs. Can I do 12B in a session now? Can I maybe do 2 session 12Cs? Like, what if I try and find a 12B that fits me well and I have someone who is my size? Can they beta feed me? Can I try and flash this 12B?
There's so much out there that I haven't climbed. So I could go to almost any crag, and actually probably any crag at the red, and be able to work on pyramid building there. Because it's not like I've like cleaned out all the easy routes at XYZ crag, because I just haven't done a lot. So that's cool. I'll keep that in mind. I will try to get outside as much as possible. A, it's fun, and B, it's going to build the skills and keep the fitness. And it's just, as much as I kind of say I'm in like a winter training block, like I'm in a winter training block, but if there's a 40-degree day, like next week, there's going to be, that's sunny and nice, or, we'll get out there and we'll climb as much as we can. When I am at the gym though, or when I am in this winter training block, we're going to focus on 2 of those bouldering days a week. Mm-hmm. And should both of those be project limit bouldering, or do you want one of those to be more of a volume, or, get some sends type session and one of them limit?
Yeah, I would say I do think that topping boulders is very important. Builds confidence. Also, we just need enough moves. Like, limit bouldering, I think, is super useful. I think it's worthwhile waiting for a little bit for that. I would rather right now, because you don't have a lot of history sticking out boulder problems to try and send them, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, we don't need to go to like 8 session boulders. That's terrible. It's terrible for people who love it. Like, right. Yeah, let's find things that consistently take you 2 to 3 sessions to send. Like, for you, I would say for 1 session, something in that range. We'll start 2 to 3 sessions. If you get to a point where you're like, this is pretty good, I kind of want to bite off a little bit more. Yeah, let's move up to 3 to 5 sessions. That, to me, around 3 sessions is a real good sweet spot. That's enough time. And you can go a little bit longer for training. Going a little bit longer can be good, but that's enough time that you've learned the moves. You're actually going to have to kind of get intimate with this route a little bit. You got to figure it out, kind of understand some things, but you're also not spending so much time on it that, one, you're getting just tired of it and kind of sick of it. You're less likely to have weird overusage injuries, which can kind of happen from Bouldering's weird. Rocks aren't made for us. We just happen to try and climb them. And so many movements are so strange that, I mean, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, we keep doing the same. It's like, oh, I'm grabbing this Gaston above my head and like pointing my elbow at the sky to try and do this move, and you wake up the next day, you're like, oh, my shoulder's a little sore. Bad side is, yeah, you have to keep doing that move if you want to ascend. Good side, literally anything else will probably not bother your shoulder because that's such a funky thing to be doing.
Yeah.
So I find, 3 sessions to 5 is a really good sweet spot. We don't have to start there. We've got time. I would say find things that are too hard for you to do in one session and ideally have to take you all of 2 sessions. So it's not like, oh, I figured out the beta, but I got too tired, descended on session 1. I came back fresh, warmed up, fired it. What do I do now? We don't want that. Like that, those happen. Figuring out bouldering difficulties for projecting is super challenging. Because also some days you just show up, you're tired, you try, you're like, no, this is great. This is going to take me a couple sessions. You come back in after a good night of sleep and you're like, oh, never mind. I'm just a god. I do everything now. First try. This is great.
Yeah. Oh, may I have some of those days. Now, where does fitting a little bit more of the pyramid building or this kind of notion that you had, can you send every V4 in the gym of all styles? How does that fit into there? Am I kind of building a pyramid as part of my warm up and then I'll go over in session on the hard thing, the thing that might take me 2 sessions? Or is that more skill based or volume day, like a separate dedicated day?
You can go about it a couple different ways. If you feel good trying hard twice a week, which I think would be good, I would say warm up, try and do some new things as part of your warm up. Maybe set a timer so that you have a specific amount of time that you're going to go through. So so that you don't find yourself at the new set an hour and a half into your session being like, oh no, I haven't like done a hard thing yet. I keep trying this one boulder. So maybe you set a, 25-minute timer, try and knock out as many climbs up to V4 or not as many. Climb through like the V4s, try and get those. If you can get a new V5, sick. And then move on to your projects for that day. Pick like 3 climbs, maybe 20 minutes each, something like that. For you, I think something that would be super important. Have we ever talked about the idea of the 7-go rule?
No.
Pretty simple. If you try a move,
I think I understand it already.
Yeah, you probably already understand it. I'm just going to say this mostly just out of habit now. But if you try a move that feels heinous, you need to try it 7 total times before you pass any judgment. And then after 7 goes, if you've made 0 progress, sure, write it off, walk off, go do something else. But if you've made progress, either can continue trying it right then or consider coming back to it. You would be shocked. 7 is an enormous number. I mean, we did this actually a few times in our sessions where over our like Skype sessions where you would try a move and you're like, oh, Nate, I don't know. That feels heinous. You're like, hey, let's just keep trying. Let's iterate. We'll make tiny little changes. And it would go from feeling truly impossible to you would stick it and, 5, 6 goes. It was like, okay. Like, this is bouldering.
I like that. I really do need that. I experienced that today when I was on those V6s. And one of them I wrote off after just giving it three tries. I was like, oh, God, not happening. So I fell way short of that. And maybe if I had given it 7 quality tries, I would have made progress. The other one, I did give it more tries and I, kind of dumped the tank, stuck it, and felt really proud about that. And then, was not able to link any more moves, but over time with some efficiencies, then the next move, I would give that 7 tries as well. Yeah, I really like that as a mindset thing. And I really liked what you said there too about not passing judgment, because I am quick. I think a lot of people probably are quick to pass judgment. Oh, that move's not for me. That's not my style. That's too hard. The setter got that wrong. It's too gunky, whatever the case may be. And saying, you know what, maybe it will end up that, but like, let me, respect it for a second and give it 7 like actual full intention tries before I pass that judgment.
Yeah. And ironically, it's the most experienced climbers who are the ones who are the most guilty of this. You watch a brand new climber, they'll flail on anything because they don't know any better. And like, it's all hard. And They just kind of get it. They're like, oh, well, I'm falling off the start of this V0. Let's try the V7. Like,
right.
It's all the same. But as we get more experience, we think, well, no, I know my body and I have all this experience of what things should feel like. But the problem is if you want to level up, if you want to climb a harder grade, the harder grade's going to feel worse than what you're doing right now. It should. It's going to feel, movements will feel unique. They're going to feel novel. You're not going to know what you're doing. You're not going to understand it. And especially if people have been at the same grade, and especially for you with bouldering, you've been at this similar level for a long time. Yeah, everything else is just going to feel fucked.
Right.
Like, and that's just kind of the nature of the beast. Like the next level will always just kind of make you think, oh God, will I ever do this? And then you just kind of shock yourself. You just keep throwing yourself at it with intention and thinking, okay, what can I do better? Or, is this just a move that's so novel that I just need more repetition so my body can catch up to my brain, sort of thing? Yeah. And then eventually you do the move. And once you do it, suddenly you start thinking, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. I could even repeat that maybe from a few moves below. What other moves can I be doing then?
Cool. Yeah, the projecting mindset around bouldering is quite foreign to me. So I think part of our semi-regular check-ins here, honestly, I can see myself kind of focusing a lot on that. I would like to do some more video sessions with you. Maybe once I identify what these kind of 2 or 3 session problems could be, whether it's on a system board or a set problem. If it's only a few sessions, like the risk of them resetting in between is pretty low. So I could maybe pull you in for a video session on one of those, and we could share that on YouTube as well, so people can see how I hopefully progress over the course of a session with a little bit of guidance from you, which I've really experienced when we did our moonboard sessions and a move felt impossible, and you're like, well, just load this shoulder a little more, and why don't you just like reach out and like see if you can touch it, and all of a sudden like it just unlocks a move. So there's some magic to be had there, just pulling from your experience. And it's not like I was getting stronger in that session or more powerful or whatever. Like I was just getting better. Like you just helped me to get better, to do things better. And that brings to mind a little bit, like right now we've been talking about all the stuff that I'll be doing at the gym, which for the most part is what I'll be doing. Like I just, in this phase of life, when it comes to bouldering, I've got a couple gyms I have access to, and I've got the red, within striking distance. There are some boulders around here. There's like Foxtown boulders that's kind of out near the red. And so like I might take a look and see what kind of outdoor boulder options I have. But if I'm being honest, like if I can get a day where I'm cleared to go climbing, it's going to be hard to convince me to not go to the red. That said, I still think it's not only possible, but also it's important to me to take some bouldering trips. So probably a couple trips to Chat and maybe a couple trips to like the craft boulders in Vegas. And as those materialize, I'll reach out to you and maybe there's some like actual boulders that you'll recommend to me. But how should I look at, like, let's say 2 trips to Chat this season? In a general sense, what kind of goals should I have or grades should I have in mind if I'm going to take a couple trips?
I mean, first I would say just Chattanooga is so great for being able to climb volume. There's so many boulders compared to a lot of areas. You go climbing in so many areas in Colorado and it's one boulder, nothing else for a couple hundred yards, another boulder.
Right.
Where in Chattanooga, everything's so dense. And especially because your outdoor bouldering experience is a bit on the lower side, man, I would try and do a bunch. Like, do a lot. Also, kind of get your hands on things. Go look at V6s, V7s, V8s. See them. It's really nice to see things in person. Because sometimes you might see a video and you're like, this is great. You see it in person, you're like, oh, yikes, this landing is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. Or, some things look better in video, some things look worse. You never know. So I would say check out a lot of different things. If you went, who would you go with?
There's a crew here in Louisville. Most of them are stronger, boulderers, significantly stronger or like kind of around my level and higher. I would say most of them are significantly stronger, to be honest.
Yeah. Man, I think something that'd be super helpful for you is to climb around better boulderers. There's so much you can learn from just the process of sitting in a boulder for 4 straight hours and seeing how do other people do this. Mm-hmm. I mean, because that's something that, especially as a sport climber, doesn't always seem, I don't know, to make the most sense to be like, okay, I'm going to literally sit at this boulder for 4 straight hours. It's 2 moves. how can I keep trying this and trying it better? And boulders can be really good at that. And that's, I would say, trying to spend time around better boulders would be a great use of that time. But otherwise, yeah, actually go out, check it out, get your hands on boulders, go look at harder things, see what actually gets you excited. Maybe talk with your friends if they're stronger, if they've already climbed these things. Try and get some input, because some things are very exciting. When you look, you're like, oh, I want to do this. And they might be like, that has a dyno at the lip at 20 feet. Like,
Right.
I don't want to do that. And I climb V12.
Yeah.
You know, one of those things. Yes, technically this is V7, but yikes.
Great
But
advice.
I would use
think
it as
that'll
like
be
a
fun.
recon mission.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, it's fun to stand on the top of things. So I think like certainly on a first trip, I'd want to do V1s through V3s or 4s or whatever I could probably get done like in a 2-day trip. But to your point, there's a lot of time and I'll be with a much stronger crew where I could at least scope out, pull on, check out harder projects, 6s, 7s, 8s, whatever, you know, those others might be on, which could be the outdoor version of what you're talking about, doing like my kind of benchmark videos, where if I can find some of those and then go and train and work really hard and then come back some months later or a year later and check in on those, you know, it could be like a little bit of an outdoor project. But most of my work honestly is going to be in the gym, and I'm totally fine with that. And then I'll be outside on sport
Totally.
routes.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go. Yeah. And the nice thing about bouldering is you can project shop so easily. If you want to project shop on a route, it's exhausting. You're going up this entire thing, you're stick lipping up, or like you're just questing through unchalked holds or territory you're not familiar with, and this thing's going to be hard.
Right.
And you come down, you're like, okay, I guess I'm going to do that on another thing. Like, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of this. Boulders are great. I mean, you literally just like pull on, try a few moves. You don't like it? Okay, drag your crash pad 5 feet to the right. There's another thing over there.
Yeah.
It's so low commitment. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm hyped on that. Actually, it's going to be a different feeling than when I was, you know, really just fully committed to an 85-foot route for the past year and a half. Cool, man. Well, look, I love this. I feel like I've got some marching orders, at least for the immediate future, which is to identify these benchmark kind of problems that I can check in on over the course of months and maybe years, who knows, at my gyms. And then I'm going to do 2 pretty hard bouldering sessions a week, and aiming for that like 2 or 3 session send level, at least for right now, until you and I talk, and we might want to adjust the dials on that. But as part of that, as part of my warm-ups, or just if I can sneak in an extra day that I'm feeling fresh, I can focus on some skill type stuff, working on walls of different angles and trying to send all the V4s or whatever feels right for me at the gym. Couple endurance days, I think probably 1, hopefully at the red or like in a cave. And then 1 might just be like hangboard repeaters, or, you know, kind of like overcoming isometrics at 60%, just so I'm not doing too much volume on my fingers.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'll just kind of feel that out as I go. And then in terms of like weightlifting and max hangs, I've kind of been doing that on my strength days. Like on my hard bouldering days, I'll kind of warm up with some of that and then maybe end the session with some of that. Do you have any thoughts on any types of strength or power-based work that I could be doing where we're not climbing?
I mean, your strength is already pretty decent. So I think putting it after climbing totally works. Like, if strength was your biggest issue, we would want to make sure you're a little more fresh for it, but I'm less concerned on that.
Okay.
I want as much of your energy and strength going into hard bouldering sessions. That's far more important right now. You know, one thing that could be useful is bouldering tends to be a lot more leg intensive in a lot of ways. You know, there are a lot more hard drop knees, heel hooks, weird things like that. So it's not uncommon that I'll have people do more calisthenic looking exercises that help make your legs more robust, especially around the knees. Stuff like that could be good. If you have a hamstring curl machine, I think those are tremendous. They can just make, because your hamstring is responsible for hip hinging, like with a deadlift, but also for knee flexion. So if you're kind of trying to touch your heel to your butt, and if you only deadlift, you're not going to get that same benefit. And also it's like when we heel hook really hard and repetitively on boulders, it's often that we are going to flex quite a bit at the knee. And if that, you know, if those tissues aren't prepared for the force that you're going to be creating, they can get a little bit grumpy at you if you do it too much.
Yeah.
So any sort of knee flexion I tend to like, especially for boulderers.
Yeah, that's cool. I will work on that. Just coincidentally, part of the beta that helped me unlock the send of the force was that as I went into that final chain run, as you probably saw, and I think you and I talked about, I found this right heel hook. I didn't find it myself. I saw somebody went up, ahead of me and did that. And I was like, oh shit, that's different. And so there's this heel hook that kind of helped me to more efficiently get into that red point crux. And on the send, I threw that heel and like really like rocked over on it. And there was like a little pop as I was doing it. And then, sure enough, for about a month after the send, it was kind of like behind my knee, like on the hamstring. Like, I don't know what, physiologically that is, but like there's some sort of hamstring tweak, if you will. Like it wasn't like a massive thing that sometimes you hear like these big pops and people have to take months off and it's like a full rupture or whatever the case may be. But in any case, it was grumpy, to your point. And it's just not a skill that I've developed or the strength around it, because I just so rarely use a heel hook. So
yeah,
to your point, if my fingers are kind of relatively weak for the grade, which they most certainly are, I'm going to need to rely on other techniques and tactics, I think, to help me ascend through these grades without making massive leaps. And I will improve, hopefully, in overall strength, including my fingers. But heel hooks, I think, toe hooks, drop knees, some of these things that you've just noted will probably need to come out of the quiver quite often. And I'm going to need to develop them somehow, maybe with your help over some videos or with some buddies, as you noted, people who climb harder than me, which is not hard because pretty much everybody I climb with climbs harder than me, will help me to maybe develop the technique of that. And then the strength component of that, as you've just noted, I think we'll need to follow along. So I'll do some hamstring curls, maybe I'll do some squats. I already do deadlifts, but I could add in like squats or pistol squats, hamstring curls. If there's anything else you recommend, I could at least start to feather those in so that I'm not exposing myself to potential injury when I do throw some like sick heel hook.
Yeah. I would start there. Keep it pretty simple. I'm of the belief that anything outside of climbing, like strength training, that is supplemental, just in the same way you're not going to eat a diet of supplements. You want to eat whole foods. And if you can't get something, then yeah, you can take some supplements. So I would say let's try and get what we can from climbing. Do try and heel hook, toe hook. When it comes to fingers, if we're spending a lot of time on fingery boulders, that's going to really check that box. And there are plenty of people who make it to quite literally legendary strength, never touching a hangboard. But if you look at the way they climb, they use a lot of bad holds. They're very intentional about it. They climb at at the right amount of volume that they're going to be able to still recover. There's a lot of methods you can use to get stronger on the wall. And it's not perfect, but I would say try and get as much as you can from there. Look at bouldering through that lens of let's get better, but also let's make sure we're trying to check all these boxes so that I'm also getting stronger. And then anything you can't get from there, yeah, let's add on a little strength training.
Cool. Great, man. Well, I'm really excited. Thanks for you distill things down in just a way that I'm very much able to digest and not feel overwhelmed by. So I really appreciate that. This has just been awesome. And let's continue to work together. I want to make sure that I'm staying on course. I've got some big goals here. And I think that with the right guidance between you and Eric and like the guys that I climb with, I think there's real opportunity for me to have a breakthrough season that isn't necessarily pushing my sport climbing grade higher, but I think just making me a much, much better climber all around. So I'm really excited about that, dude. Thank you. And for those who are watching and listening who want to work with you, are you taking on clients? How can people best work with you or do one of these consultations like I just did?
I do remote consultations through Power Company Climbing, and I also coach in person in Salt Lake City. I'm not taking remote programming clients right now, but yeah, those other two avenues are both things I do. And then I also I have a YouTube, which is just at Nate Drolet, where I talk all things climbing and trying to advance.
Yeah, you're really putting out great videos over on YouTube. So I will underscore that for those who are paying attention right now. Just pop over to Nate's YouTube. There's just incredible resources on there that are free and you can just watch them. And then if there's something specific that you're working on or a plateau or whatever it is, sounds like you can reach out to Nate through Power Company Climbing to get a consultation. And is a consultation just, it's like a block of your time to talk about whatever, or review videos, or talk about a trip that's coming up, kind of all of the above? What's a consultation usually entail?
Kind of all of the above. There's an initial form that they fill out, so it kind of give me some base information. Then what I always ask people is send me as much video as you want. And if you want to send me training logs, you can send me Excel spreadsheets. You can send me, a Word doc that has all your goals for the year, whatever it is. I'll read through all of that ahead of time, and then we can discuss all of this through that 1 hour conversation.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I gained a ton from this. I really appreciate it. I hope those who are watching and listening did as well. Hit up Nate if you've got any thoughts or questions. Check out his resources. I'll link to all of them. And my man, let's get going. I'm really excited. Hey, are you still focused? I remember, last fall you were shifting into a sport climbing focus. Is 2025 still the year of sport for you, or are you returning to the bouldering dark arts?
I'm going to do probably 50-50. The end goal. So I did a ton of endurance work last year. God, I actually gave myself Achilles tendinopathy from so much endurance work from dropping off of boulders. Fortunately, I figured out how to solve it. I literally just jump rope for a few minutes before every session, and now my Achilles is fine. But I was doing a lot of endurance last year, so I feel moderately fit. The end goal for me is I've always loved when I can sport climb when it's hot and boulder when it's cold. To me, that's very enjoyable. I don't like sport climbing when it's cold. I don't like bouldering when it's hot. So this year, I'm probably going to do more like 75-25 sport to boulder, most likely. But yeah, if it's cold, I'm going out bouldering. I'm trying to just get out as much as I can. I kind of moved here and put my head down and just started trying to coach as much as I could and really focused on that. And now I'm coming up on my 3rd year in Salt Lake, and I'm like, man, there's just so much good climbing I need to take advantage of.
Awesome. Oh man, I'm so hyped. Well, we're kind of both on this polarized training then. We've got sport goals, we got bouldering goals. We're going to be on this journey here. And thank you for this check-in on this road to V8 / the pyramid for me. I'm really excited. You've added a lot of context and clarity for me. So I'm going to get to work, and let's do another one of these soon.
Man, I'm excited. I appreciate you trusting me with this.
All right, that wraps things up with Coach Nate Drolet. I'm psyched. I'm nervous. I don't know what I am. I'm sick. I'm fighting a cold. That's probably it. But yeah, I think I'm like a lot of feelings around working on what I think for me is quite an ambitious bouldering goal for the year. But I know it will help me. And I'm glad you all, those of you who are listening, who have reached out to me, helped to nudge me in this direction. As I've noted before, I was not leaning this way. And in conversation with some of you all, as well as other trusted friends and coaches, I think everybody feels like I would get a lot out of this. So I'm going to jump in and see how it goes. And I'm really excited about the specificity that he laid out with doing those like baseline problems, like recording those baseline problems. I had intended to do that this week, but then now that I'm sick, I want to be like fully healthy and ready to try my hardest on these so that I can gauge them properly over the course of the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever. I think it'll be really fun to have those. I love his 7 try rule. I'm going to get out there and try hard and fail and keep trying. And I hope you are too. Thank you for being on this road with me. Let me know what you thought of this. Of course, reach out to Nate if you are interested in having a consultation, and I will keep you posted and also be checking in with Coach Eric Hurst on my road to the pyramid and my road to V8 as we go. Now, if you'd like to see the uncut video of this chat, plus score instant access to more than 100 hours of amazing bonus content, and I'm talking about episodes with the likes of Adam Andra, Hazel Finley, Alex Honnold, Magnus Mitbo, Chris Sharma, Allison Vest, and so many more amazing athletes and coaches, well, you can get it all right now for about the price of a beer each month. And I got to tell you, I could go for a beer right now because I've been working really hard out here in the podcast / utility closet. So if you are in a position to buy me one of those ice cold beers, it would be so rad. There's also a free trial happening right now, so if you want to date me a little bit before you buy me that beer, I get it. You can listen to all that bonus content for free and then stick around if you like it. Just swing on over to patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show to get access to that full library right now. Or if you're an iPhone person, you can subscribe right there in your Apple podcast player. Thank you so much. huge thanks and appreciation to our show sponsors who have brought you this episode at zero cost. Check your show notes for the links and special discounts to those brands that are only available to Struggle listeners. And by the way, you can see all of the show's awesome sponsors and special deals by just popping over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/deals. Hey, did you know that the Struggle's carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? They are just doing amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. You can get inspired by their latest grant recipients over at honnoldfoundation.org, and then just toss them some love if you can, even a few bucks a month. They're doing such cool and impactful work. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. This show was produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by Glen Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked it, and if you like this show just in general, would you consider sharing it with your climbing friends? The more who listen, the closer that I will get to making this my full-time gig, which would be so cool. So thank you in advance for sharing this episode and also rating and reviewing it if you got a hot second. Really appreciate you. I hope your training and your climbing are going great. And if you're struggling like me, well, at least the struggle makes us stronger. I'll see you soon.